So The Last Jedi by Ryan Johnson is a complete and utter failure. Uh, it's going to make a lot of money. Uh, I don't think it's going to make anywhere near the kind of money that Force Awakens made, and I'll tell you why. I think people are going to turn against this movie, and the bigwigs at Disney and Ryan Johnson and a lot of the people that liked the movie are not going to understand the real reasons why people are going to turn against this movie. The reasons that people are going to turn against this movie are going to be completely legit. And I know that a lot of people thought that, because fans turned against DC, right? With Batman v Superman and Justice League. And Justice League bombed. I guess it's probably going to lose something like $100 million or something. At least that's what I heard last. So it's a failure not only as a movie, but failure economically. And there is this narrative that it was just trolls. It was people who just had it against DC, had it out for DC, like pro Marvel people or whatever, had it out against DC, and they did everything in their power to destroy the DC cinematic universe because they love Marvel and hate DC just cause. That's wrong. And there's going to be a similar narrative about why there's like this immense backlash against The Last Jedi. Remember when The Force Awakens first came out, all I could find, and I'm sure there were negative reviews, but all I could find was positive reviews. Everybody was saying mostly positive stuff about it, with only like a few tiny little complaints. But you couldn't find that many real negative reviews online about The Force Awakens. But over time, the more people thought about it, and the more people watched it and kind of picked it apart, they realized it was like there was this growing resentment about some of the major errors, which were subtle, because I think that as a movie it worked. It worked pretty good. Like it hit a lot of the right beats, and it had a lot of positive qualities as a movie, and it in my opinion it worked as a movie and as a setup, and people are going to give it, because it was a Star Wars movie that didn't suck. It accomplished its role, its job, and I still kind of agree with that idea that its job was just to be a Star Wars movie that didn't suck and set up a new trilogy, and it did both those things. Not perfectly, but it did it without failing. And it made a lot of money. And so there was this slow kind of backlash. Slow, where people, as time went on, people kind of took off their rose-colored glasses and they started seeing all the little flaws and all the stuff that really could have been done a lot better by someone like a better writer. It could have had a better vision behind it. The characters could have been better fleshed out. The storyline was so derivative of the original trilogy that it was almost like a reboot, stuff like that. So, but with The Last Jedi, it's going to be very different. The backlash is going to be, it already is happening, and it's going to be severe, and it's going to build, but it's going to build much more quickly than it did for The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, the backlash was a slow burn. The Last Jedi, it's going to be like dynamite. Right now the fuse is lit and it's about ready to explode. Because people are going to wake up and realize this movie is an abomination of Star Wars. I had it, when I was watching the movie, obviously this is before I saw any reviews about it, because I didn't want to know anything about the movie, really. I'm watching the movie and I really wanted to enjoy it. And not even halfway through, I'm thinking to myself, I hate this. Even though I was enjoying it, especially the humor. There's a lot of criticism about the humor. Personally, I like the humor. I like the humor. There was a few jokes I think that were in the wrong, that shouldn't have really been in at that moment. But I like the porgs. I like laughing, and I actually liked all of C-3PO's lines. Like every time C-3PO was on the screen, I just laughed. And he had a few lines. People say he wasn't in it that much. He had like a handful of pretty good lines, and I remember because I laughed every single time, and I loved it. So the humor really wasn't the problem for me, and that's what made me kind of enjoy the movie. And then there was a few parts that were really cool. They were really like, yes. Like I even did that once. Yes. I did one fist pump. But so I was sort of enjoying it on some level, but I mean, this voice in my head was just like, I hate this. Like I really hate this movie. Like, and then I'm like, after I saw it, I'm like, that was so bizarre. Like, what just happened? Like, did they really do that? Did somebody really do that to Star Wars? And yeah, the word that really seems to sum it up is abomination. It was a total abomination of what Star Wars is. And people kind of say, oh, get over it. Like, Star Wars is not this grandiose, like, it's not religion, right? No, but what made Star Wars great, the original trilogy, was that there were elements of religion. There were elements of spirituality, actually, not religion, spirituality. But religion as well, because religion is to do with tradition, and there were certain traditions in the Star Wars mythology that reflect and pay homage to traditions of religious orders, especially religious orders. The Jedi are like a religious order, right? They're like monks. They really are. I mean, they take vows of celibacy, I think. And they develop spiritual forces. They're like yogis. And in so many different ways, The Last Jedi just totally takes that and throws it in the trash can. The first scene when Luke Skywalker takes the lightsaber, when Rey gives him his father's lightsaber, he throws it over his shoulder. And I'll admit, I laughed. But that moment was actually symbolic of what the whole movie was doing. It was taking that original mythology, including the spirit of that original mythology, and just tossing it in the waste bin, saying, this is ours now. Essentially what Rian Johnson has done, and whoever else is in the Rian Johnson camp, a lot of people say it's Disney's fault, but I mean, Disney gave Rian Johnson full reign, as far as I know. Like, there was probably some studio mandates, but I don't think one of the studio mandates was to totally rip out the heart of Star Wars and then piss on it. Like, I don't think that was I think Disney had some quite a bit of political, like, agendas going on. There's a lot of political agendas going on now in Disney movies, but this movie goes well and beyond that, into subtle. It desecrates Star Wars in a very sophisticated way, because it attacks the very core of what Star Wars actually is or was, as a metaphor, as a metaphor. Movie is metaphor. That's one thing you learn when you start to study screenplay, screenwriting. Movie is metaphor. Metaphor for life. Metaphor for what's real, what's true. And this movie takes all of the metaphor of the original Star Wars trilogy and this throws it away, and then takes, like, it throws that away, but the shell, the outer layer, the appearance, is sort of still there. And then what do they put inside the core? They put, and this some of this was not consciously done. It's not a conspiracy. It was done because this is what flowed through Rian Johnson creatively. Is they put this postmodernist, moral relativistic, really distorted view of the world and reality and what's true, what's good. They put that inside the body of Star Wars after ripping out the spirit, the original spirit. Now the spirit that inhabits Star Wars now has no reality to it. Maybe it's evil, maybe it's just evil, but it certainly is not. There's no substance. There's no real substance to it. There's no real substance to it. Because moral relativism basically means anything can mean whatever we want it to mean whenever we want it to mean it. And so basically, the Jedi now mean whatever Rian Johnson or whoever wants it to mean whenever they want it to mean it. The Force, same thing, means whatever they want it to mean whenever they want it to mean it. And the characters now, or whatever they feel like making them. But I mean, there's a lot that I could say, but a lot of it's already been said eloquently, and some very astute observations have been made about how Johnson kind of came in and just took what was there and just made it his own, but in an extremely disrespectful way, and again in a way that totally it's an abomination of what Star Wars actually was. And the title Last Jedi is apropos because it is like Luke Skywalker was the last Jedi that is actually a real Jedi. Everything that happens from now on will be this within this covering this moral relativistic worldview of it means whatever we want it to mean. So Jedi now means whatever we want it to mean. So Jedi is not really a real thing anymore. It's just a name. Kind of like Christian, right? Christian used to mean something. Now anybody could say I'm Christian, and it's just like, oh, okay, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean that you're following certain principles or that you go through certain training to become more Christ-like. The Jedi, being a Jedi meant that you had to be. Not only did you have to be gifted, but you had to make certain commitment. You had to go through certain rigorous training. And like most Jedi would have certain inner conflict that they'd have to work through. And Rey doesn't really have, I don't know, she doesn't really have a real inner story. Like, she really wants to know who her parents are, but we never really find out why. Why, like, we never get to the core of what's driving Rey. Like, and you could sort of assume that she wants to be somebody, but which is an ego drive. Like, I want to be somebody, I want to be important. But she's so perfect that it never really comes off that way. It never really comes off as a character defect. I mean, she wants to find her place in all this. Like, that's virtuous. I want to find my place in this. Just play my role. No, that's too virtuous. Like, that's too perfect. There's no character defect in Rey. Like Rey should have been Luke Skywalker's teacher, you know. And of course, they could have had an interesting thing going on where Luke kind of maybe has fallen in certain ways as a Jedi. He's had a spiritual fall. And I think they could have done something like that, where Luke had some sort of fall to the dark side, but not like all the way. Just he had kind of had a little bit of a lapse and he's kind of like trying to recover from that and trying to deal with the guilt. I don't mind that, but he never recovers. He never recovers. And training a new Jedi would be a way that he could have had a story arc, or he could have come back and recovered and become his, like, not only his former self but even greater, because now he has the wisdom. And Yoda makes a very Yoda actually, this is a very good point. It's like the movie is saying something without knowing it's saying it. Yoda says, "Failure is the greatest teacher." Basically, he's telling Luke, like, you're a total failure. But don't worry, that's good, because she's going to learn what not to do. I think that's what the meaning was. And of course, people who look at this, like, if you look at it from a race perspective, the white men are always the bad guys, usually. And the women and people of color are the good guys in these new Star Wars movies, because there is this political, socialist, I guess, I don't know, agenda going on. And anyway, I don't know if you could really look. I mean, you certainly can, because it certainly does work to apply that model of interpretation. But it's like Rey, the way that things pan out, Luke actually has nothing to offer Rey. That's the way that he's portrayed. And in truth, Luke would have a lot to offer Rey. He could not just tell her what not to do. He could not just warn her about the dark side of the Force and the dangers of the Force. He could also actually train her in the hope that she would become the last hope, the last Jedi, right? So they do this interesting thing where they sort of tease that Luke is going to come back and he's going to wake up. He never really does. He never comes back. He uses a hologram of himself to not fight Kylo Ren, but just delay him long enough for the rebels to escape. So he never does fight. He never does actually face the demon. A warrior has to face the dragon and has to be willing to fight. But like Luke Skywalker is completely neutered in this movie. He's got no more warrior spirit left in him. And that doesn't make any sense, because why else would Rey go to him if she wasn't going to get trained by him? Like, she doesn't learn anything from him. It's almost like the movie's saying you can't learn anything from the past. You know, like Luke throws the lightsaber away like a piece of garbage, and then it's like you can't learn anything from the past, and then they highlight it. They draw circles around it. This idea, but when Yoda himself seemingly destroys all of the ancient Jedi texts, like thousands of years old, just destroys them all, like, and basically says they're shit, they're nothing. Can't learn anything from the past. Can't learn anything from wise men or women who came before. We know better. It's such a childish viewpoint. It's so immature. Rian Johnson is an extremely immature filmmaker. He's talented, kind of like Rey. Talented, extremely immature. Doesn't know anything. thinks she knows everything, or he thinks he knows everything. Like, Rey does not understand the danger of the dark side, right? Neither does Rian Johnson. Obviously. Because if you think you can handle it without a teacher, without an instructor, without learning from people who came before you, do you think you know better than all the world's religions and all the greatest teachers who ever lived? You know better than them. You're going to make your own way, and you're going to rely on talent alone and intuition. No, you need both. You need talent and intuition, and to believe in yourself, but you also need to believe in these higher principles that are ancient and eternal, actually. Moral relativism doesn't believe there's any such thing as eternal principles, as eternal truths and values. It doesn't believe that it believes that we just assign whatever we want. And that won't work. So it's a very false narrative, spiritually, that this movie, it's very subtly, I guess, not subtle to some, tries to inculcate children's minds with. By the way, there's no such thing as a gray Jedi. I mean, people who keep saying that, no, that's stupid. Jedi is white or and black, and Sith is black. It's like one's white, one's light, and the other's dark. One's good, and the other's evil. You can't be part good and part evil. It doesn't work. You can't play with both sides. It doesn't work in reality. Gray Jedi is actually a dark Jedi. Is actually a Sith. Because as soon as you make a deal with the devil, you've already made a deal with the devil, if that makes any sense. You can't just go back to the light whenever you feel like it. You have to belong to one or the other. Jesus Christ said you can only serve one master. You can't serve two masters. And that's an eternal principle. That's a truth. Jesus Christ didn't make that up. He didn't invent that. He didn't invent anything. He said, I am only sharing what the Father told me. My words, my teachings are not mine, he said. And some of those truths kind of got into the original trilogy, came through, because they're eternal truths. They come through in a lot of movies. You don't have to have, it doesn't have to be an overtly Christian movie, because these truths are eternal. They don't belong to any particular religion either. It's not like these are just Christian ideas. They're found in other religions as well. But I guess you could say that Jesus is sort of the main ambassador for certain eternal principles. The main kind of spokesperson for certain eternal principles that may have been echoed in other ways by different people, but he's sort of like the main voice of certain truths, and probably the most important truths, to be honest. Well, not probably, he is. I sort of, because I love Krishna, I love Hinduism, and there's many truths there that aren't as pronounced in Christianity. So I believe that, you can draw from other sources, but the point is you're drawing from ancient and eternal and timeless wisdom. You're not making up your own whatever you feel like. And that's exactly what The Last Jedi does. And that's why The Last Jedi is an abomination. Not just of Star Wars, but of what makes a movie not only a good movie, but spiritually right. The movie is not only wrong spiritually, but it's wrong as a movie. It's not even a good movie. And, I wonder, people that say that it's a good movie, I wonder where they're really coming from. I wonder, how they can justify that. Because there's so many things wrong with the movie. In the plot, and the character development. The visuals are good. That's about the only thing. And the jokes. The porks. I love the porgs. To be honest, I just love the porgs. I don't have any problem with the porgs. I'd be happy if the porgs were in every Star Wars movie from now on. Maybe not. Maybe you get sick of the porgs. I don't know. I love the porgs. I'm not sick of the porgs yet, but I'm already sick of what is at the heart of this new Star Wars trilogy, and I don't think that J.J. Abrams is going to be able to remedy it, because I don't think J.J. Abrams understands. He's part of the reason we're in this mess, because he set it up and didn't plan anything out. Didn't consider that this is going to be a trilogy. He made a single movie and left a whole bunch of open-ended questions, and just gave it over to the next guy. Said, "Okay, you figure it out." It's not the way to write a trilogy. J.J. Abrams is good at copying. He's good at putting together like a good, decent movie. But Star Wars is beyond that. It requires someone who's really basically a genius, that can get certain spiritual principles as well. That, like, I think in some ways maybe George Lucas lost that. That's why the prequels don't have it. The prequels are bad for a lot of different reasons, but I think the main reason they're bad is because they're missing something fundamental. But they still have it. They still have some of it. They still have some of that spiritual quality. This new movie has none whatsoever. It's completely devoid of that spiritual essence. And as Yoda said, failure is the greatest teacher. The failure of The Last Jedi should be a really good teacher for all of us. To really dig deep and ask ourselves, why did this movie fail so badly? Like, it's similar to, why did Batman v Superman fail so badly? It's obvious. I mean, to have a Batman who's murderous, who just wants to kill Superman, and a Superman who is not really, doesn't really know whether he wants to be good or evil. Like, good is good and evil is evil. Period. That's not boring. You can still do a lot and make a good story out of that. And that's why Captain America did so well, because they stayed true to the original character. If they had stayed true to the original Luke Skywalker, I have a feeling this movie would have been a lot better as a movie, and do a lot better long term. This movie is going to drop like a rock at the box office. And they may not be able to figure out what went wrong, because that would require them to look at what's wrong about their ideologies, their belief system, their religion. When I say religion, I mean anything that becomes like a belief system is a religion. So if you have some political ideology that says there's no absolute truth, and things just mean whatever I want them to mean, whatever I want them to mean it, and the tried and true eternal principles of our forefathers are wrong or irrelevant or obsolete, and we can make our own rules. We don't need God's rules. One of the things, I started reading the Bible, and one of the things themes that is repeated throughout the Old Testament is the critical importance of ideological purity, and when I say ideological, the differences were between God's religion and man's religion. Like, that's the way that the Old Testament has it set up, because God is like speaking through Moses, and that they're creating this religion, this new religion, but it's all coming through God. Like, and Moses is completely surrendered to God, and he's completely obedient to God, And then he comes, so he kind of channels this, like he just asks God, hey, what do you want us to do? And God says, do this, 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 and this. And then people, like when Moses is on the mountain or whatever, people are like, where's Moses? He's not coming back yet. He was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And they, like, screw this, let's just make our own religion. So they do. And God's a little bit, let's just say he's a little teed off. And he has to kill 3,000 people. Because when you let a man-made religion infiltrate a true religion, it's not going to work. It's going to get watered down, and it's going to get diluted, and ultimately it's going to be destroyed. The original religion that came from God. So the God-made religions or God-inspired religions are founded on spiritual, eternal principles and truths. Like I said, Jesus said, this isn't my own doctrine. This is God's. This is not something I came up with. It's not something I invented. The new religions of postmodernism and relativism and all that stuff, all these political belief systems, are man-made religions. They're not based on eternal principles. They're inventions of human thinking, and they will fail every time. And the only times when they sort of succeed are when they're sort of based on the eternal principles, right? And that's why the original Star Wars had such an impact, because the themes, the underlying spiritual themes, and the whole theme of the hero's journey really is based on spiritual, eternal truths. So you take that all away, it's going to collapse. It's going to collapse badly. That's what happened to DC. It's not what people think it was. It wasn't trolls. It was the people that were angry at DC were not anti-DC people. Most of them were people who really wanted DC to succeed. Just like most of the people that are going to be really mad at Star Wars are the people that most wanted Star Wars, The Last Jedi, to succeed as a movie. We don't care how much money it makes. We want it to succeed as a movie. We want it to be great. We want it to be as good as it could be. Not just as a movie, but as a metaphor. And not only is it not as good as it could be, it's probably as bad, as a metaphor at least. It's the worst I could possibly imagine it being. And so people are right to criticize it, and the backlash is going to be 100% justified. This movie is awful on so many levels, and